Don't get ripped off when you buy a car. This is a simple process to show you the things that I've learned in the last 40 years of buying many cars. I've bought over 200 cars in my life, not because I'm a dealer, because I just enjoy cars. But I've learned a lot of mistakes. Now, here's my tools that I needed to shop for a car. Fridge magnet. What? Why would I want a fridge magnet? Bondo. When you take an ordinary fridge magnet with you, put it on the wheel wells of the car. If it falls off, that wheel well is full of Bondo. I learned that from experience. Bought this beautiful looking car, and maybe 3 months afterwards it started breaking up, and then I saw inside. I could now, you go through the learning curves. Flashlight. Bring yourself, now if you got an iPhone, there's a flashlight built into it, so that's fine. A Robertson screwdriver, or a screwdriver kit. If you end up buying it, you got to put the plates on it. Now the test for Bondo is simply go to all the major sections of the car, wheel wells, all 4 wheel wells, and put the fridge magnet on it. If it's solid, then you're okay. Forget about the odometer. Look at the evidence. How does the passenger seat the wear? Is it worn? Is where you put your left arm sitting, has it looked worn? Look at the brake pedal and the gas pedal. Are they worn? If it's showing 50,000 kilometers or miles and the pedals are worn, that's probably been turned back. There are unscrupulous people that will buy vehicles at the auction, and then whatever system they have, I don't know how they do it, but they turn the odometer back, and you get a vehicle, you've got something with low kilometers. My view of a car is not how many miles are on it. My view is how many miles are left in it. Now, I think of miles. I'm an old fella. Even though Canada has kilometers, I still think in miles. The wear and tear in the driver's seat, if you sit in it and the padding feels like it's been sitting there for a long time. Now, here's another thing, too. You could have a vehicle that a person has sat in it for 10 hours a day. Could have been a commercial use vehicle. Maybe it didn't drive that many miles, but the engine was running. Sometimes the engine can be running for 8 to 10 hours a day. That's still wear and tear on the car. Now, how do you tell if a vehicle was a commercial vehicle? I remember going out and checking a car from my brother. It was a truck, actually. And the dealer says, it's a mint condition, all the rest. I go and look at it there. Well, geez, there's a hole drilled in the dash. What possible person would somebody drill a hole in the dash except to mount a commercial unit of some sort, maybe some kind of a GPS thing? So that thing was forget about it. How to tell if the vehicle was a write-off? Now, if a vehicle has been written off, which means there's been an accident, and the insurance company says, well, this is a write-off, like that. Some people buy write-offs. They go somewhere, and then people rebuild them and sell them as cars. Now, there is a record of this sometimes with the government. You have to do research on it, but you can also look when you open up the trunk and open up the hood of the car. Do you see any places where there's been crayon marks on it? They're basically, when you buy a used part, they write a part number on that part. Some people don't do that. Another experience I had there, a friend was looking at a beautiful car. It was only 2 years old, and he was ready to buy it. I had the cash, everything, and I says, well, let me look at it there. It looked, I couldn't see anything, but I opened up the glove compartment, and the owner of the vehicle said, those are private papers. Well, I guess they're private, I open it up, and it says Oh, it's the write-off thing. I said, this car's been written off and rebuilt. The paperwork was in the glove compartment. I says, well, you don't want this car. This guy's selling something that'll give you nothing but headaches. And there's another thing that I learned too, because I've been stuck with a couple of these. How to tell if a car was from back east where there's rust. I live on the West Coast. 99% of all cars are rust-free here. It doesn't rust here. I grew up in the prairies where pretty much 99% of the cars are rusted in 10 years. And if you're back east where they have salt on the road, it's even worse. Now, I ended up buying a couple cars, and I learned my lesson. Here's the things that I learned. If you open up the hood of the car, look at all the pot metal. They call it pot metal, that little, like the brake lining metal and stuff like that. If you've got little white corrosion on it, it's basically salt corrosion. That car's come back, and that car is not a local car. It has been from someplace else. Here's a simple little trick too. Turn on the radio and press all the preset buttons. If they don't line up to anything, that car's not from there. Such a simple thing. But if you line up and there's 12 preset and they're set to static, they're set to a different city. You can also look for signs of mold. You may be able to smell it, but also that's why you have your flashlight. Take a look at the carpet. Take a look at underneath the seats. See if there's any moldy stuff there. Now, of course, you're going to want to check the car for liens, so check out that. Make sure that you don't buy a car with a $10,000 loan registered against it. Now, another way to check how the car is working is that you want to check for what's called blow-by. Now, blow-by is a system where if you've got a car and you go down a long hill and you put it in second gear and do not put your foot on the gas, just let the compression of the engine slow you down going down a hill. And when you get to the bottom of the hill, hit the accelerator. Don't go crazy, be safe, but hit the accelerator and take a look in your rearview mirror. If you see a cloud of blue smoke, that car has a ring problem or something wrong with the engine. That's something that you'll want to be aware of because that's a major repair. Now, also, when you want to check the brakes and see if they need attention, if you go down a hill and you put your foot on the brakes with a light application of the brakes, if the brakes are shuddering, that means that you've got problems with the rotors or you're going to need a brake job soon. The other thing is that when you're driving on a level road, if you apply the brakes, if it veers to the left or veers to the right, then there's a problem. Now, the other thing that I do too is that I do a brake test to see check the strength of the engine. Now, you got to be careful with this and not be stupid about it. You have to be careful. I put the brake on and I rev the engine a bit to see if the engine dies. When I put the emergency brake on and I put the brake on just enough to put it under load. And like I said before, check the glove box. Go through every piece of paper. That is your clue center. A lot of people leave. Here's some things that I've found. The odometer read, let's say 50,000 miles. I'm looking inside and I see a oil change that was at 195,000 miles. Oh, geez, where did this 100,000 miles go? The guys turned back the odometer, and they've done that thing. You can also see if the car's been repainted. And a poor paint job will have what's called orange peel. There'll be little That's why they call it orange peel. It looks like the peel of an orange. There's little indentations in there. It means that it was like a backyard paint job and it wasn't heat set. A proper paint job has to be done with a bake. You have to bake the stuff. If it's painted in the backyard, then you're going to have problems. Check the trunk to look for and look under the hood. Now, when you're looking at the trunk, I bought a Cadillac, and it was a beautiful car, not a mark on it. But after it sat in the rain for a few days, I noticed there was some mold, and there was there was a leak. I had to hire a special leak fixing guy, and it was a major job. It was a major headache. You need to look for, lift up the spare tire. That is the lowest spot in that trunk. If there's any moisture in there or any mold on the spare tire, you've got a leaky trunk, which is not cheap and easy to repair. Now, the other thing I learned too is that back in the early days, I looked at the dipstick. If you've got some water in the oil, if you pick it up and you've got some white goo at the bottom of the dipstick, you got some problems there. It's not something that is easily fixed either. Get a certified mechanic to check it out before you buy it. But with this little checklist, you can eliminate, you don't want to take 10 cars in and spend $100 each one. At least eliminate the ones with an obvious problem with this system. Now, the other thing is I always look at all four tires and look for uneven wear patterns. If they're cupping to the left or cupping to the right, then there's a problem. And if they're not, if there's 3 Michelins and 1 no-name tire, and that means that they've had a problem and they haven't bothered to put a proper tire on it there. If you've got 3 or 4 different tires, it's probably not a good situation. You want to see if the tires all match each other. A well-maintained car has matching tires. Now, also, if you're looking for, I've had this experience where beautiful car will look great. I couldn't see any problems with it. I had the AAA guy come out, and he had better knowledge than I did. He said immediately, well, the frame's been warped. And when I took it for a drive, they call it dog tailing. It ran so that the back wheels were about an inch or 2 more than the front. You always had to correct it with the, you were always doing steering wheel corrections. This is because there's been frame damage. You can't do that. Now, again, the frame damage, there may be a crayon mark on it. Always look for anything that has a crayon mark, which would mean that it came from a junkyard. You got to check those things out. Now, say you're buying a car from a private household. How can you tell if this guy's a car flipper? Well, now with the age of computers, you can check his ads if it's on Craigslist or Kijijis and search for other ads with his phone number. And if he's got 25 cars listed in the last 3 months, well, then he's a flipper. And very unlikely that it's the best deal for you. You might as well buy somebody who is an original owner. And that, now here's another thing too. People buy cars, and it's a very, very cautionary thing. They're going to sell you a car and it's not in their name. They've bought it from a person and they haven't registered in that name because they haven't paid the tax on it. And they're going to sell the car to you. But he's got a bill of sale from that original owner. You know, that's a cautionary thing. It's not something you want to deal with as well. Now, how do you tell if it was bought from an auction? Well, if it's bought from an auction, there may be crayon lines on the windshield, and they don't wipe off that easily. If you put water on that windshield, even if the crayon is still going to show a little bit, which means that it's gone through the auction block and there was a number on the windshield. And you can also, again, check out the people leave all the papers in the glove box because they're lazy. You may have found the auction thing. Say if it was a $10,000 vehicle and they bought it for $6,000 from the auction, you don't know what the reason it was put through the auction. And, it's your choice if you want to have that. How to tell if it was bought from another province or state, like from back east. Vehicles that are from back east are generally in worse shape than vehicles from the west coast because of the rust. They have poor winters there, like they're massive. A 10-year-old car is not the same in the west coast as it is from the east coast because of the weather. Now, you can check things. It should be declared. New rules are putting them in that it should be declared. But otherwise, you can check again under the hood for corrosion on the pot metal. And that's one thing. Also checking that the stereo is set to local stations, or maybe it's some foreign thing. You have to check it out. Now, I had this experience where I bought a vehicle from a dealer. They had sent it to a private mechanic, and it came back, it's in perfect shape, all the rest of that stuff, with this 100-point checkout and stuff. This was a motorhome. I took it out on my first trip. I went down and had a nice weekend, got 3/4 of the way home, and the check engine light came on, and we stalled. Check engine light came on, and basically within 20 feet, the vehicle just died. We had to hire a cab and take all our groceries home and everything else, and then I just left it on the street to try and figure it out. Now, because it was a motorhome, it was a bit more difficult to find a place that would be big enough to fix it, so I actually hired a mobile mechanic. I thought it was because I'd bought bad gas. You can sometimes get bad gas with water in it. That was my initial idea. I mean, it had been checked out by the supposed mechanic. Then when I had this mechanic come out, he changed he emptied the gas tank. And that was like a 3-hour job, and that wasn't the problem. Then he pulled the spark plugs. They were totally gunked up. So whoever did this thing never even bothered to pull out the spark plugs, and that's what filed it. It was so, they were just not working. It was fixed for about $30 worth of parts, but it left me stranded and cost me hundreds of dollars. If you want to get estimates on how expensive your car is to be repaired, say if you're buying a foreign car or a domestic car, take your most common repairs like brakes and transmission and stuff like that, and just phone the local dealer. They'll give you say that you have a 10-year-old Cadillac or 10-year-old Mercedes, and get the price to replace brakes and this and that. They'll give you a quote over the phone, and you have an idea of what it will cost. The most expensive cost to any car is, people don't think of it, it's car depreciation. I bought a brand new Toyota Highlander a couple of years ago. That car, SUV, truck, whatever you want to call it, is still worth what I paid for it because they're so rare and there's such a good reputation. Now, I previously had a 7 Series BMW, which I bought secondhand. It had, within 7 years, dropped $100,000 in depreciation. The car was still in great shape, but it had dropped $100,000 in depreciation. Some people can afford that. I couldn't really. Now, get your own mechanical inspection. Don't trust something done by a dealer. The mechanic works for them. not for you. That was my motorhome experience. I'll never forget it. Neither did my wife. Abuse to a car, never changing the air filter. I've had this one. This one car had been run around North America, up in the Arctic, everything, but the people never bothered to do a service on it. When I took the air filter off, it was full of bees and bugs, and I wondered why this thing was blowing blue, and it was only a 2 or 3 year old car. There had never been a single service done to it. The cheapest thing you can do is change your oil and change your air filters. Always